9 out of 10 Zionists are not Jewish. But what is Zionism? When did it start, and what does it mean? In a biblical context, the word Zion has come to mean Jerusalem, particularly in reference to Jerusalem's ancient citadel conquered by David. It implies a utopia or paradise on earth after the return of the Messiah, which could mean the second coming of Jesus to Christians, or a future king for the Jews from the Davidic line. Even Islamic hadiths contain visions of a messianic figure called Mahdi that would appear to purify the world. But the concept of a savior that will usher in a messianic age lasting for 1,000 years predates all Abrahamic faiths and has its roots in the Zoroastrian religion. It was amongst the ancient Iranians that the prophet Zarathustra, also known as Zoroaster, began preaching about 3,500 years ago of a divine plan that would culminate in a glorious transformation and perfection of the earth. Zarathustra underwent a series of illuminations in which he saw the god Ahura Mazda, Lord of Wisdom, and from that point onward he prophesied for a new religious faith, Zoroastrianism, which by the middle of the 6th century BC, roughly during the reign of Cyrus the Great, had become the official religion of the royal dynasty. It is through King Cyrus's conquest of Babylon that the Jews in captivity, and by extension Christianity and certain influential secret societies, were exposed to Zoroastrian millennialism, which is the belief in a prophecy involving a coming or returning savior to usher in a new age lasting 1,000 years. In the Zoroastrian religion, there's a constant struggle between the forces of order and those of chaos, which would end in a battle and the alleged defeat for the forces of chaos or evil, after which there would be a universal resurrection. The world would be purified through fire, and the wicked would perish, the righteous would survive and live eternally, unaging in perfect harmony. This Savior would resurrect the dead and lead them to victory over chaos, lasting for a millennium, which is the origin of the Judeo-Christian millennialism, which spread after Cyrus the Great freed the Jews, who were also exposed to the Mithraic mysteries of the Magi, which was an initiatory cult that involved 7 stages of illumination, secret passwords and handshakes, and a degree of mysticism which became the foundation of Gnosticism, Hermeticism, alchemy, philosophy, Neoplatonism, esoteric Sufism, and the Kabbalah that was infused into mystery school religions and secret societies such as the Knights Templar, Rosicrucians, and Freemasons. This brings us back to Zionism, which has its stated goal of rebuilding the Temple of Solomon, which metaphorically implies the restoration of an ancient empire that was centered around Jerusalem before being destroyed through war and conquest. So, in this context, Kabbalistic Zionism is a religious concept which is merged with a political expectation, whose earliest millennial texts were produced under captivity in Babylon under the influence of an ancient Aryan magician priest class that utilized symbols such as the Seal of Solomon, also known as the Star of David, as well as the swastika, whose occult meaning I discussed in my last video called The Esoteric Religion of the Aryan Magi. That said, this millennialist influence can also be seen in the Baha'i faith, where the city of God will renew every 1,000 years, as well as the New Age teachings such as Theosophist Alice Bailey, who taught that the Christ World Teacher, or Maitreya, would return sometime after the year 2025. Jehovah's Witness believe that Christ will rule from heaven for 1,000 years as king over the earth, assisted by 144,000 ascended humans, and a host of other Christian sects, in particular after the Protestant Reformation, that placed an emphasis on the book of Revelation, which was interpreted to say that Christ would return and Satan would be locked away for 1,000 years. The most controversial interpretation of millennialism manifested in the Nationalist Socialist movement in Germany, where Hitler's Third Reich was envisioned to last for 1,000 years. Reich means empire, and the First Reich was the Holy Roman Empire, which was considered the age of the Father. The Second Reich was the German Empire, which lasted from 1871 to 1918, referred to as the Age of the Sun, followed by the Third Reich, the Age of the Holy Spirit, where in its early years, many Germans referred to Hitler as the German Messiah, especially when he conducted the annual Nuremberg rallies from 1933 to 1938, on a date somewhat before the September equinox. In a speech held on the 27th of November in 1937, Hitler commented on his plans to have major parts of Berlin torn down and rebuilt. Quote, to build a millennial city adequate in splendor to 1,000-year-old people with 1,000-year-old historical and cultural past for its never-ending, glorious future. Of course, the Third Reich did not last for 1,000 years, but only 12 years. That said, the first settlements in Palestine in the early 1800s were not set up by Jews. The German Templars were part of the Christian Zionism movement, whereby the European powers sought to establish their presence in the Holy Land after 1840. These adherents of the German Lutheran Church established settlements in Jerusalem, Haifa, Galilee, and what is now Tel Aviv, serving as a model for the Jewish pioneers who came much later, after the German Templars already established colonies, roads, infrastructure, and agriculture in the Holy Land. In the 1930s, many of the Templars in Palestine, named after the Temple of Solomon, joined the Nazi Party, and despite modern propaganda, their influence was acknowledged at the time, as was Hitler's role in working with Jewish Zionists to populate what became modern Israel. Quote, Jews from Germany have reinforced the economic growth they found in progress. Some of the earlier arrivals brought considerable means. Their investments have given a powerful impetus to the industries of the new Palestine. Boys and girls of urban families prepared themselves for the land, joining or founding colonies. Hitler made Haifa, runs a Jewish proverb. German Jews are helping to develop there a great industrial center for the Near East.
Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews.
Nothing exists showing that Hitler ordered the extermination. There's no Hitler letter, which is a smoking gun. Enttreffung, the complete removal or the deliberate removal of the Jews.
Live on Channel 5, this is the 10 o'clock news with Deborah Norville.
Coming out revealing secret negotiation between the Nazis and the Zionists in 1933, which allowed German Jews and their assets to go to Palestine.
Deborah, with the rise of Adolf Hitler to power in the spring of 1933, the Jews of the world were faced with a dilemma. They could raise a cry of protest, a cry few would heed, or they could make a deal with Hitler, a deal that would bring a step closer their dream of an independent Jewish state.
American Jews marched calling for the boycott of all German exports. Jews throughout Europe echoed that call, so did Jews everywhere. But a group of Zionists at the same time was quietly negotiating an agreement with the Nazis to allow the immigration of German Jews and the transfer of their assets to Palestine. That deal, reported in August 1933, was the transfer agreement. Palestine, sparsely settled by Jews at the time, was radically changed as a result.
I lived in Palestine from 1933 to 1936, and we saw every week transports of German Jews coming to settle in Palestine.
German Jewish settlement of Palestine was, for a time, official Nazi policy. These photos of Jewish life in Palestine, along with a lengthy text, appeared in 1934 in the Berlin paper Der Angriff. A Nazi Visits Palestine was the title of the multi-part series. A medal was struck by Goebbels in commemoration. On one side, the swastika. On the other, the Star of David.
While the German National Socialist government had a working relationship with the sect of Zionist Jews, they were simultaneously hostile to a primarily secular Jewish movement, which has some post-World War II historians confused, especially those that perceived the Jewish people as a homogeneous, politically monolithic demographic, which they are not. In a 1920 article written by Prime Minister Winston Churchill titled Zionism versus Bolshevism, A Struggle for the Soul of the Jewish People, Churchill starts off by praising the Jewish people's contribution to Western civilization. He then goes on to describe what he calls international Jews as having, quote, most, if not all, of them have forsaken the faith of their forefathers and divorced from their mind all spiritual hopes of the next world. This movement amongst the Jews is not new. From the days of Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx and down to Trotsky, Bela Kun, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization and for the reconstitution of society on the basis of arrested development, of envious malevolence, and impossible equality has been steadily growing. It played a definitely recognizable part in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century, and now at last this band of extraordinary personalities from the underworld of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people by the hair of their heads and have become practically an undisputed masters of the enormous empire. There is no need to exaggerate the part played in the creation of Bolshevism and in the actual bringing about of the Russian Revolution by these international and for the most part atheistical Jews. It is certainly a very great one. It probably outweighs all others. With the notable exception of Lenin, the majority of the leading figures are Jews. Moreover, the principal inspiration and driving power comes from the Jewish leaders. In violent contrast to international communism, Zionism presents to the Jew a national idea of commanding character. It has fallen to the British government as a result of the conquest of Palestine to have the opportunity and responsibility of securing for the Jewish race all over the world a home and center of national life. Zionism has already become a factor in political convulsions of Russia as a powerful competing influence in Bolshevik circles with the international communistic system. Nothing could be more significant than the fury with which Trotsky has attacked the Zionists. The cruel penetration of his mind leaves him in no doubt that his schemes of a worldwide communistic state under the Jewish domination are directly thwarted and hindered by this new ideal, which directs the energies and the hopes of Jews in every land towards a simpler, a truer, and a far more attainable goal. The struggle which is now beginning between the Zionists and Bolshevik Jews is little less than a struggle for the soul of the Jewish people. It is particularly important in these circumstances that the national Jews in every country who are loyal to the land of their adoption should come forward on every occasion, as many of them in England have already done, and take a prominent part in every measure for combating the Bolshevik conspiracy. In this way, they will be able to vindicate the honor of the Jewish name and make it clear to all the world that the Bolshevik movement is not a Jewish movement, but is repudiated vehemently by the great mass of the Jewish people. In light of Churchill's acknowledgement of a secular left-wing conspiracy to impose a communist world order, and given that the Bolshevik Revolution that ushered in the Soviet communism that killed tens of millions was a viable threat to all of Europe, propaganda leaflets disseminated by Germany during World War II can be better understood in hindsight. Quote, "You have been trapped. You have landed on the continent to face the armed might of Germany, but not for the benefit of Britain. Your country will gain absolutely nothing from this struggle, no matter how well you may fight. The Bolshevists alone will profit by your sacrifices. You have been trapped into risking your life for but one purpose, the Bolshevicization of Europe. Consider these points and ask yourself, why should you fight for Stalin? Why die for Stalin? In dying for Stalin, your soldiers are not dying for democracy or the preservation of the democratic form of government. They're dying for the establishment of communism and a form of Stalinist tyranny throughout the world. Furthermore, they are not dying for the preservation of the integrity of a small nation, England's old war cry, but are dying so that Poland shall be a Soviet state, so that the Baltic states shall be incorporated into the Soviet Union, and so that Soviet influence shall extend from the Baltic to the Balkans. Every British soldier who lays down his life in this war is not only a loss to his own country, he is a loss to the common cause of European civilization. Germany and England's quarrel is a form of traditional rivalry. It is more in the nature of a private quarrel which Germany did not seek. The Soviet Union's quarrel, however, is a quarrel with the world. It is a quarrel with our common heritage and with all those values, moral, spiritual, cultural, and material, which we have, all of us, Englishmen and German. Why did Hitler really hate the Jews? What did he want from them? How did they bother him? But it's all written here in Mein Kampf. This book was published only recently. It just got approved to be translated to Hebrew. It was forbidden all these years. But there is an earlier translation. It was made by Yad Vashem. They were allowed to. Hitler claims in his book that the Jews are communists. They made the Russian Revolution. They killed their 30 million Russians, all the intelligent ones, in a cruel and horrific way. And that's their plan for the entire world. The next country in line is Germany. They founded the German Communist and Socialist parties, and it's true. If we don't defeat them now, they will eliminate us, and they will slaughter another 20 million, all the intelligent people. And that's how they want, from country to country. So eventually, the only intelligent ones remaining would be the Jews. And he repeats it many times. Make no mistake. And he is right. The Russian Revolution was made by the Jews. The Russian army was built by Trotsky, who was an incredible genius and anti-Semite like no other. He created the Jewish division of the Communist Party, which members informed on their father, mother, brother, and son. Whoever owns a Siddur, or even a Hebrew learning book. I'm not even talking about Teflin or Mikvah. He destroyed everything, also by the Jews, but for sure by the Russians. In the first picture of the Russian government, out of 13 members, 6 were Jews. Who founded the KGB? Jews. So everything is clearly written. He didn't hate the Jews because they had pios. He didn't hate them for observing mitzvot. Because they are communists. And he writes it clearly. The Jews destroyed religion and faith. They spread in Germany the heresy in God because they don't believe in him. He writes this right here. Now you understand why they don't teach it in schools? Because who writes the curriculum? Those same leftists. They destroyed all the values, poisoned literature and theater. Who did it? Torah-observant Jews poisoned the German theater? Out of 9 large German newspapers, 7 were owned by Jews. So do you understand why it's forbidden here to teach about him? And what he says? Spirituality and virtue have been on the decline, with the ramifications becoming apparent in the West. Traditional ancestral values are being replaced by a secular political agenda, where the family unit is discouraged and instead degenerate alternative lifestyles are being promoted. Culture and community are being replaced by a Marxist, globalist ideology, socially engineered through a network of corrupt politicians, subverted academia, and a controlled media. There now exists an internal struggle within secret society networks, many of which have been infiltrated and sabotaged by the same hidden hand that they were set up to oppose, where traditionally noble organizations that were at one time hailed as knights have given way to lodges that are no longer loyal to their original virtuous ideals. That said, the Jewish Messianic movement was influenced in large part due to the Lurianic Kabbalah by Isaac Luria, which gave rise to the Sabbateans, named after Sabbatai Zevi, who declared himself Messiah in 1666, gaining a following of half the world's Jewish population during the 17th century, causing a rift in Judaism, whose repercussions last until this day. Which brings us to my very first book, published in 2015, called 1666, Redemption Through Sin. And now is a good time to read the introduction. Quote, "Most people have heard of Jesus Christ, considered by Christian followers to be the Messiah who lived over 2,000 years ago. But very few people have ever heard of Sabbatai Zevi, who declared himself to be Messiah in 1666. He amassed a following of over 1 million believers, half the world's Jewish population during the 17th century, by proclaiming that redemption was available through acts of sin. Considered a heretic by many of his contemporary rabbis, nonetheless his fame extended far and wide. Sabbatai's adherents planned to abolish many of the ritualistic observances because, according to the Talmud, in the Messianic time there would no longer be holy obligations. Fasting days became days of feasting and rejoicing. Sexual promiscuity, adultery, incest, and religious orgies were encouraged and practiced by Sabbateans. After Sabbatai Zevi's death, his philosophy would be continued and expanded on by his Kabbalistic successor, Jacob Frank. Frankism, a religious movement of the 18th and 19th centuries, centered on the leadership of the Messiah claimant Jacob Frank. He, like Zevi, would perform strange acts that violated traditional religious taboos, such as eating fats that were forbidden by Jewish dietary laws, ritual sacrifice, promoting orgies, and sexual immorality. Jacob Frank would eventually enter into an alliance formed by Adam Weishaupt and Mayer Amschel Rothschild called the Order of the Illuminati. The objectives of this organization was to undermine the world's religions and power structures in an effort to usher in a utopian era of global communism, covertly ruled by their hidden hand, the New World Order. Using secret societies, such as the Freemasons, their agenda has played itself out over the centuries, staying true to the script. Opposition is handled by a near total control of the world's media, academic opinion leaders, politicians, and finance. While still considered a conspiracy theory to many, more people are waking up each day to the reality that this is not just a theory, but a true conspiracy.
I want to first take a look at Robert Sefer's 1666 book, and specifically some things I'm going to speak about in this book here are how this whole idea of redemption by way of sin got started. This is from Robert Sefer's book there. Starting in 1666, going up into the 1700s, all the way into modern days, so the Illuminati, the Rothschilds, etc., has been to perpetrate such global sin on such a vast level that this would actually bring about redemption. After reading a lot of this book here from Robert Sefer, I actually have a better idea.
I promise you, the little bit amount of money that this man charges for this little book is well worth it for what you're going to read in it, especially coming from this individual. This was a good read. Some passages I had to read multiple times. His writing style is very good. Like I said, he's a master of abbreviation, and that's what I like. I want to hear the information. I want to hear the data. I cannot stand reading a book that is 400 pages of fluff when the entire book could have been 32 pages. I can't stand that. Robert's book, it was published in 2015, so he's been a published author. He says it was his first published book, so I guess you're looking at over 8 years ago, about 8 years ago. He's been a published author for 8 years. Now, Mr. Sefer is an anthropologist. He's a scientist. He is credentialed, not like Graham Hancock, who uses ghostwriters.
Redemption through sin.
I'll read just a little bit here from this book by Robert Sefer, 1666, Redemption Through Sin, and read just a little bit about Sabbatai Zevi and after him Joseph Frank. And like John said, we did a complete midnight ride on and it's amazing because this Joseph Frank was there with Rothschild and Adam Weishaupt at the founding of the Illuminati. So this is really, really important concepts in history there on that, the flight of the Kabbalah wizards, I believe we called it. But it says here, it is thought by some scholars, this is on page 16 of Mr. Sefer's book, it is thought by some scholars that Zevi had deeper connections with the Sufi order. Some similarities between the Sabbatai and Don May include the deliberate violation of the halal ritualistic group sex or wife swapping, ecstatic singing, chanting, and belief in the mystical Kabbalah. A celebration on the 22nd day of the Hebrew month of Adar, known as the Festival of the Lamb. They said that the violation of the Torah had become its fulfillment, which they illustrated by the example of a grain of wheat that rots in the earth. That's how much they hated the God's law. And it says that it ended in total darkness with religious sexual sharing of daughters and wives. Mr. Sefer writes, Jacob Frank, whose followers regularly sought redemption through infamous religious sex orgies on solstices and equinoxes.
And something that people don't get is that how can we have, two Jews that are opposed to one another?
People forget that Judaism is a religion, and like every religion, it's got its sects and schisms. So, just how we're not surprised to find Sunni Muslims at war with Shia Muslims, we shouldn't be surprised that there's potentially internal struggles inside of Judaism as well.
And the Sabbatians, are they a specific family, a bloodline, a secret society?
Well, they're a little bit of both and everything. So they of course started with the announcement of Shabbatai Zevi in 1666. because there had long been predictions that the Messiah was going to come in 1666. This was based on interpretations of the Book of Revelation, which is a Kabbalistic book, and that's another tangent we can go back to.
Sure.
And so they basically orchestrated his announcement or his mission, and then it was largely spread through Rosicrucian circles, particularly what's called the Hartlib Circle. So the thing about Sabbatianism is that, and this is what people forget. So today, Zionist propaganda is so thorough that people believe that Jews are a race. To be a citizen of Israel, you don't have to declare your belief
DNA or
in the
anything.
Torah. It's basically your mother has to have been a Jew.
Do you think that someone whose mother is not Jewish and father is Jewish is Jewish?
Listen, like if we go with the religious, it's not Jewish.
Do you think that somebody whose father is Jewish but mother is not Jewish can still consider himself Jewish?
No.
So you go by halakha?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
Because the mother is not Jewish.
Okay. But if he considers himself Jewish still?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Your mother has to have been a Jew. So it's a nationalist movement. So, for up until Sabbatians, until Sabbatianism, Judaism was a religion. It always has been a religion. And this is why it's so much in conflict with Orthodox Judaism. Basically, so Sabbatianism is a heresy of Judaism. So the Orthodox Jews fought against it. They excommunicated them. And so for the longest time, in fact, I think the problem is that the Orthodox Jewish community underestimated the influence of the Sabbatians. So it's not until the 18th century that you get, it's principally Moses Mendelssohn. And Moses Mendelssohn, who was a member of the Illuminati, he was also a Sabbatian. And what's interesting is that there was a list of ordination that was found that had listed and anyone who's looking for this, Rabbi Entelman's book, To Eliminate the Opiates, is a great source for this. So this list of ordination is basically a list of the ordained successors of Shabtai Tzvi. So Moses Mendelssohn is the father of basically what's called secular Judaism. So he's the one who invented the idea that to answer the Jewish question, because mainly until this time, Jews used to live sequestered into ghettos, and they were, by definition, they were followers of the religion of Judaism. And Moses Mendelssohn invented this concept that Jews didn't need to follow their religion anymore, that they could assimilate into the broader society. But the fact is, according to, in Judaism, if you leave the religion, you're not Jewish anymore. Right? You're excommunicated. You're just a German or a Frank or a French person or Englishman. There's no difference between, a non-practicing Jew and anybody else who's any other kind of atheist or secular person.
Do you believe in God?
No.
So this is how. It's because of Moses Mendelssohn that you get the beginnings of this concept of the secular Jew, of Judaism as a national identity and separated from the religion. And that's what made the rise of Zionism possible, which basically was a nationalistic movement. So the thing is that's why for so long there was this antagonism between Orthodox Jews, and not to be considered confused with Hasidic Jews, which was another branch, and Sabbatians. And so they had competed for years, and the Sabbatians were considered heretics until they really slowly started to gain control of the Jewish movement. It's not so much in England, but particularly in the United States. I mean, there's a substantial portion of Jews are now Reformed Jews. That doesn't mean they're necessarily Sabbatians, but they've come under the influence of Sabbatianism. So this is how Sabbatians are basically anti-Jewish.
That's what the first Zionists were. They were Sabbatean. I'm leading to that. They actually were Sabbatean. And they participated in this stuff. They used the word secular. That's the word they use. They were seculars. This is beyond secular. Secular to me is not being affiliated with any religious group. This is beyond that, but they were called secular. Chiloni in Hebrew from the Greek Hellenistic is what they called themselves, and they were proud of it. And their goal was to turn Israelis into Chilonim. They hated the religious. Let me not kid you how much the labor Zionists hated the religious. By the way, Gaza was the home of Shabtai Tzvi, and his chief theologian, his PR flag was Nathan of Gaza, Nathan of Gaza, and the Jews don't recognize what's going on in Israel. Go and look up Shabtai Tzvi in a book of Jewish history. Where did he go? He was the most influential rabbi, in modern times, and he has been rubbed out of the history books. Keep that in mind. You can't find that much of Shabtai Tzvi. When Shabtai Tzvi converted to Islam, most Jews abandoned, but not all. There was a sect in Turkey called the Dhamma, who decided that this was, in fact, a magical pronouncement by Shabtai Tzvi that we should all convert to other religions, but secretly practice Sabbateanism. Okay, now what we've got is a movement now that is now a true blue, use the word conspiracy because that's what it is. They're hiding, they may be, well, originally Muslim. That changed very quickly 50 years later when Jacob Frank was born in Poland and converted his Jews to Catholicism. But originally it was Muslim. What can I say? Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank was Europe's second Messiah. That's what he was called. The second Messiah of the Jew was Jacob Frank. All of a sudden, Europe's Jews, by the many thousands, were becoming Catholic publicly. They despised Catholicism, but privately they were Sabbatean. And as fantastic as it seems, there really, really are conspiracies of silence. If the rules are you don't open your mouth, you don't open your mouth, they exist. The Sabbateans didn't just exist as a tiny little cult. They were being converted by the thousands in the 18th century. This is when the Sabbateans made, well, a pact with the big devils. Suddenly, Jacob Frank got very rich in 1786. He moved his sect to Offenbach, a suburb of Frankfurt. Frankfurt was also the home of Mayor Amschel Rothschild and the home of someone named Adam Weishaupt. Little by little, for those unacquainted with this piece of history, the Rothschilds are the Sabbateans of the world. And here is why. There was a meeting that took place apparently in Rothschild's humble home then in 1786. He was not all that wealthy. He was a coin dealer. His sons made him wealthy. His 5 sons expanded a business. The business was to control the economies of nations and thus control the nations. He found a magnificent formula. If we can get hold of the nations, economies, we've got the nations. He sat with Jacob Frank, who wanted the Jews to become non-Jews. He wanted them to become Sabbateans. He wanted them to accept the real Messiah of the Jews, Shabtai Tzvi, and incidentally, and the second Messiah, Jacob Frank. That's one of this little 3-pointed triangle, that's one point. Adam Weishaupt was the founder of something called the Illuminati. And yes?
Sorry, we're having an informal conversation.
Well, yes and no, but...
Could you do a favor, please? Don't speak about the Illuminati. The Illuminati is considered one of these things, but the Jews are taking over the world.
Not Jews, it's Catholic. Let me go on. I can't change what is the fact.
No. This is not true.
No, I'm not. All right, questions at the end, and that's that. You have to deal with facts. Now, the story in all the history books is the same thing, that there was, just before the French Revolution, a horseman fell. In his satchel were the plans for the revolution. In the satchel were the plans for the Illuminati and so forth. It was all banned. Throughout Europe, it was banned. And that put Weishaupt, that put Rothschild, and to a lesser degree, Frank, into a problem. What do you do if you're banned? And they came up with something that has changed history for good. Weishaupt said, well, what we do is we take our tenants and we put them into an organization that has lodges and chapters worldwide, and we subvert the existing organization to our tenants. And the organization they chose was British Freemasonry. Now, there was no such thing as a Freemasonic conspiracy before the 18th century. As far as I can tell, they were very nice. They were a builders' guild. They backed builders throughout Europe, and they were all right. All of a sudden, there are revolutions. All of a sudden, you have something you never saw before, ever. You actually saw talk of one organization upending whole nations.
It's been fascinating to follow the thread, and I've tried to trace it back right to its origins. And so what I have done is I've traced the history of the Kabbalah, the Jewish Kabbalah, to Babylon in the 6th century BC. A group of heretical, basically the earliest Jewish Kabbalists were perceived by the rest of the world as being Chaldean Magi from Babylon, and supposedly followers of Zoroaster, the founder of the religion of Zoroastrianism. But they weren't in any way normal, conventional Zoroastrians. They were Magi who practiced magic, which is where the name magic comes from. And that's what they were celebrated for throughout ancient times. And their influence extended to Greece, where it resulted in the philosophy of Pythagoras and Plato. And that's really where the occult historians pick up on it, because those two are really sort of the godfathers of occult history, particularly Pythagoras. And then from there, it evolves into Neoplatonism, which is influenced or cross-pollinated with Gnosticism, and Merkaba mysticism, which is basically the earliest form of Kabbalah. And that evolved over time. It led into Sufism in the Islamic world, because what happens at this time is that, Western history is explained as having undergone a period of a dark age, but what's actually happened is that tradition first enters into Islam in both the Ismaili movement and the Sufis. And the Ismailis, or particularly a group called the Assassins, then influenced the Templar Knights, and that's how, as well, according to Masonic historians, how that tradition then re-entered into Western history, Western culture. And so again, that tradition evolved over time into the Renaissance, the foundation of the Rosicrucians. Out of the Rosicrucians came the Freemasons. Out of Freemasons came the Illuminati. Illuminati, of course, is just one of many factions. I don't believe that they have the influence that has been accorded to them. I think that the Martinist movement was the most important. Out of Martinist movement, you get the Synarchists, and out of the Synarchists, you really get the modern variation of occultism.
So let's get into that part of it, and then also the apocalypse part of it, because I find that very, very interesting.
Well, that's one and the same, right? They're trying to fulfill the Book of Revelation. So the Book of Revelation is it's the blueprint, and so so Sabbatianism follows the Kabbalah of Isaac Luria, and according to Luria, the whole point of Lurianic Kabbalah is that you don't sit around and wait for the Messiah. You have to work to bring about the conditions that will support or accelerate the coming of the Messiah.
בזמן שישראל לאחרונה ניתצו כמה עניינים. מה שרואה עוד, וגם מצו שעדיין משיח ליבו, אז הייתה משהו עם מה ידיעתו.
עושים.
הכנראה שהיא מספיק, כי היום כבר כמה שעות בגיל עדיין ליבו, אבל יש עוד כמה שעות, אבל יש להשתדל גם היום, בצורה טובה. יש שמחה וטוב לבו. כדי שחסידים מקפידים שכל עניינים יהיו שמחה. בצורה טובה, הצלחה רבה.
So, if you apply that to the book of Revelation, you'll see that as time proceeds, then things get worse and worse. And the book of Revelation talks about, wars and rumors of wars and disease and so on and so forth. So as far as they're concerned, that those are prescriptions. Those are the things that they need to do in order to create the coming of the Messiah. So, it sounds strange to the most of us because it seems so contrary to our, basic moral compass. But these are people who have so thwarted their concept of divine service that they're Machiavellian, so that it's the ends justify the means. So they actually believe by creating chaos that they are fulfilling divine prophecy.
My name is Robert Sepper. I'm an anthropologist. My published work is available on Amazon and through all other major book outlets. If you'd like to support my work, you can do that through patreon.com. There should be a link in the description. Please subscribe for future updates. Leave your thoughts below. Have a wonderful weekend, and I hope to see you again soon.